let's get to the mailbag. What do we have to start?
We got a lot today. We got 6 pages of questions.
I don't think we're going to get through all 6 pages.
I don't think, unfortunately, we're going to get through a lot. Let's start with Jake Lee from Twitter. Writes in, which player do you think has the most to gain from this year's playoffs? And he says as a comp, thinking like Jalen Brunson from last year.
Right. Oh, interesting question. You know what's funny? We were asked this question on First Take, and I said Giannis because the list of multiple people who have won multiple MVPs and multiple Finals MVPs is you can count them on one hand, and they're all NBA legends. Actually, I think there's 6 of them total, so he would be the 7th. You know, I thought he had a chance basically to cement sort of his long-term legacy as a top 10, top 15 player of all time. If he's using Jalen Brunson as a comp, then that kind of leads me in the direction of someone who is a potential free agent. And similar to last year, because a lot of guys just re-sign with their teams, it's not a very deep free agent class. You know, if I look at teams that I think potentially could win an NBA championship, and most of the teams that are still in, I still feel pretty strongly about. I don't know who's a free agent. Who's a free agent? I actually don't know.
Well, I think I could think of one person who plays in New York City who's going to get paid.
Oh, well, yeah. Josh is going to get paid. Yeah, he'll get paid for sure. I'll give you one.
Evil F.
I'll give you one. We saw his performance last night against the Lakers. Desmond Bane, our guy Desmond Bane.
Oh, yeah.
Look, I think he's going to get – they're going to extend him. They'd be stupid not to. And given that they're, a smaller market, given that they drafted him, I would expect him maybe not the max, but close to it for that rookie extension. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that, he's averaging, call it 35 a year on that contract, especially because you've got next year, which is 2023, 2024. You've got year 1 of the deal in 2024, 2025. And then in year 2, the new TV money kicks in. You have to assume there'll be a bump in the salary or the cap. So he's going to get paid regardless. He has a chance to get pretty damn close to the max if he plays the way he did last night and the Grizzlies end up winning and making a deeper run in the playoffs.
Yeah, he's been unbelievable.
I like that question.
O'Shea Brissett Burner. O'Shea MR. What's the greatest playoff performance you've witnessed in person?
Great question. The greatest series from a player that I witnessed in person was the 2009 Conference Finals. LeBron James averaged 38, 8, and 8 for the series in 6 games. We threw everything at him. I don't think the rest of their team was it was pre this notion that you need to put, shooters around LeBron. It was, pre-Heat, pre-Cavs. So we just clogged everything up and we threw multiple bodies at him. We always had a guy at the nail. He wasn't taking a ton of jumpers and he just
the buzzer beater year?
Yeah, that was game 2. And he just got to the fucking basket and scored and put everybody in foul trouble. Greatest single game was definitely Kawhi, game 6, 2021, Clippers, Mavs. We had them beat. We were up that game, and he had the most surgical 44 points on 18 of 25 shooting. No wasted dribbles, just a monster. By the way, we want to wish we gave a little love to Victor Oladipo. We want to give some love to Kawhi. Just awful. And I know yesterday we talked about this on First Take. His situation. And I brought up the word empathy. And, I'm going on a little tangent here, and I apologize because we're going off mailbag. But as an athlete who has been hurt and as an athlete who's had a couple serious injuries, nothing like a torn quad tendon, nothing like a torn meniscus, nothing like a torn ACL. I know the rehab process. I know being away from the team. I know being not able to do something you love. It's grueling, man. It really is. And the guys that continuously are having these injuries like Vic and like Kawhi, I feel for them.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to say is, Mad Dog, and I'll talk to Mad Dog about this in person. I'm not throwing digs at Mad Dog. Mad Dog brought up Larry Bird playing through a concussion. He brought up Kevin McHale playing through a hairline fracture in his foot. And it's interesting because, look, I do think I'm not saying the game was easier. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's a reason guys were able to play through stuff. Medical knowledge for one. The style of play of the game. The game back in the 80s was very, and this is not in reference to Larry Bird. This is more in reference to Kevin McHale. The game back in the 80s was very linear, right? You're playing Lakers in the finals. It's fucking up and down. And then in the half court, you're playing a little box. You're playing a little box around the paint. The Celtics had a play where they would put Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, and Larry Bird. Two of them would be on one block and one would be on the other block. And they would just set back screens for each other until one of them got the ball in the post. That's not today's NBA. I know what is required to play in today's NBA. You can't do that. The other point I made yesterday, because this gets brought up all the time. It got brought up with Zion. The other point I made yesterday was this idea that, hey, you can give us 10 to 15 minutes at 70% or 80%. You're going to get fucking roasted. You're going to get roasted. And you're going to get exploited on the court. And within 2 or 3 possessions, if you play through a torn meniscus, if you play through a torn hamstring, you're going to get exploited. It's impossible to do that. And it's also, this is the other point, it's in the worst interest, not the best interest of the player. 1987 finals. Found this article yesterday after First Take. They're writing about Kevin McHale and his injury. Happened in March. Didn't initially realize it had happened. Played through it. Got worse and worse and worse. They've got quotes from the doctor treating him. Yes, the bone can separate. It would cause long-term problems. It would cause screws and pins and surgery in his foot. They've got a quote from Larry Bird. Well, damn. If he's going to have a major surgery, I say get his butt out of here, right? There's a blurb in the article. Kevin McHale in game 2 managed 15 points and 5 rebounds, but he couldn't guard James Worthy on the other end, and Worthy had 33. That is the issue. That is the issue. You can't play hurt. There are certain injuries and certain guys where you can play through injuries and be effective. A torn meniscus and a torn hamstring is not one of them.
Yeah.
It's not one of them.
Fox plays through the finger. If it's a hand thing, it's a little easier probably to play through than
there were times in my career, like, again, no major injuries. Although I do think anybody who's had a herniated disc, and I've had multiple herniated discs, it's fucking sucks. You get a herniated disc and a spasm. I have a degenerative disc at L5S1. I've had it, since I found it out 2 weeks before the draft. You get a back spasm, and there's varying degrees of a back spasm. But when you get a back spasm and you lock up, literally lock up, you can't move, can't get out of bed, can't tie your shoes. How the fuck am I supposed to play in a basketball game? Now, there were times where, 5 days later, I'm like, all right, I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to play through this for the next week, and I would. There were times I cracked my fibula head, and they said it's non-weight-bearing bone in your leg. As soon as the pain tolerance is good, so 2 weeks later, I played in a game. I played all the games until the All-Star break after that. Took another 3 weeks till I felt pain-free, but I was able to manage it. I didn't have the meniscus tear, a torn hamstring. Yeah. You can't play through that.
Well, also, and you mentioned this yesterday about just when you've played high-level sports, you understand this. When you have an injury, it greatly increases the chances of making the injury worse or potentially adding another injury off it because your body isn't right. And I'll give you a specific example of this. This is what happened with Vic.
Yeah.
His first injury was because he was playing hurt.
Yeah.
If he wasn't playing hurt, who knows if that happens? And D Rose, to a certain extent, when he tore his ACL, was probably like that too. It's like you have to. There's a reason why you have these medical staffs.
KD, I mean, he had a calf injury that he was out, that he was nursing, ended up tearing his Achilles. Like, I hate talking about these injuries because I actually feel sick to my stomach. It's gross. It's gross. The point about the cumulative effect is great too, because I think injuries beget injuries. And Todd Wright, who's an absolute legend in the sports performance space, longtime UT head trainer, went to Philly, worked with him in Philly. He's now head of sports performance with the Clippers. He always used to say to me, "You guys are master compensators." That's what he would say. You guys figure out ways to play. And the bad part about that is eventually that leads to a serious injury.
Yep.
And going back to Kawhi, I know he's got a long road ahead, and I know he's going to load manage for the rest of his career. But Jesus, man, I just want to see him on the court. He's fucking that good.
We saw it in game one. Saw it in game 1 and 2. Nathan Langone writes in, do you think with their current success, Sacramento is a destination stars will be considering? Their style of basketball is something to be desired.
It's a good question because Sacramento is not necessarily a free agent destination historically. I think Mike Brown, I saw an interview with him the other day. He was with Ernie and the guys on TNT. He was talking about the growth of his career and how he has developed basically a modern coaching style and how much that has changed since, the early 2000s when he was with Pop, right? And his time with Cleveland or his time with the Lakers. And I'm listening to this interview and I'm like, fuck, man, that's a guy I'd want to play for.
Yeah.
What's interesting about Sac, though, is they're so young. I said this on First Take yesterday. They don't need to be a free agent destination. Now, who knows what happens with Harrison Barnes? He's probably, one of their older guys or whatever. But their core group of young guys are all, 27 or younger?
Yeah.
They've got a long runway here. And I think if they can draft around the edges really well, and if they can pick up rotation level guys, maybe a fifth starter, whatever happens with Barnes. Again, I'm not saying Barnes should leave. I'm just saying they've got a bright future regardless. I don't know that they need to be a free agent destination.
Yeah, because sometimes when you add another star to a system, this is a record-setting offense. I mean, it's not like you need more points. It's like you need guys that can help around the margins.
Yeah.
Not a Laker hater is the Twitter.
I love these.
Who's the most underrated role player?
It's Derrick White. I know I keep saying this.
Yeah.
Like Derrick White. So what's interesting is I think it was, I don't know if DeJounte talked directly about this, but there were times where Derrick White was there was a playoff series where he was the number one guy. At times, most of the time it was DeJounte. But you get a guy who has been a 1 guy, a 2 guy, a 3 guy, a 4 guy too in San Antonio. So he's had all those roles. He understands all those roles. Then you bring him to a team with 2 stars and a bunch of guys kind of like him that have been in a bunch of different roles and starred in those roles. To me, he's the perfect role guy.
Yeah.
The perfect role guy.
Yeah.
He can do everything for you.
Do you think he should be playing more down the stretch?
Yeah, I mean that was a big thing. I brought up we had a 50-second video yesterday. They made 6 egregious bad decisions. One of which wasn't a B-roll, but one of which was he didn't play down the stretch in Game 5, and they started the clip too late. But at the start of the last play, and by the way, ridiculous shot from Trae Young.
Yeah,
ridiculous
last 3 minutes.
Yeah. He had 100% usage rate in clutch time. Like he literally did everything offensively for the Hawks. That's unheard of. 100% usage rate.
Could we? I don't know. This is another sidebar. Could we give Trae Young a little credit? Because I feel like he was a punching bag all season, and they're probably not going to win the series.
Yeah.
Almost certainly not going to win the series. But I feel like he has redeemed himself significantly over the last, whatever month or so. And this is a guy that got to the conference finals 2 years ago. It's like he's had a great career for where he is in his life.
I think it's with him. He's a star. There's no question. He's a guy. And look, to a degree, I think I've talked about this before. This is not a knock on Luka. Both of them, you've got to figure out the right way to build around them, and that's a challenge. Like Kevin Durant, Jason Tate, like they're not they're plug and play, but it's just like big wings that can guard multiple positions. They're the biggest luxury to have, and when you have a star at that position, they're the easiest people to build around. Derrick White, beginning of the play, he's guarding Trae Young. And to me, he's the guy that probably can guard Trae Young the best in space, meaning the pickup point can be higher, his length can recover quicker, and they point switch to get Jaylen Brown, which is fine, like Jaylen Brown, but then Jaylen Brown's pickup point was a little too low. Marcus Smart came way too late on the double. You see him as Trae's pulling up. He's like running into the frame. And the way they had set up with someone in the dunker spot, I would have just sent Marcus, as soon as Trae Young caught the ball, I would have just sent Marcus Smart and rotated out of it.
Yeah.
They had an opportunity to do that, and they tried, but it was 2 seconds too late.
I'm going to combine these three questions because they're similar, and they're about one playoff team, one half playoff team, and one non-playoff team, but just what they can do this summer to get better. Raphael Ferrone, Mark Jackson Jr., and Nick Delisio asks about Brooklyn, the Wizards, and the Bulls. And so if we're just making one, we don't have to go deep on these teams, but we're like one thing they should be thinking about this summer that where they can improve. What are we thinking?
With the Wizards and the Bulls, I'd blow it up. Very clear. Blow it up. Sorry.
You think the Bulls for sure? Blow it up?
Yeah. Sorry. And look, they're probably in that 4, 5, 6 spot if they have Lonzo.
Yeah.
But that's probably the ceiling. Even with the healthy Lonzo, your ceiling's not that high without Lonzo. So, look, if you want to be in the play-in every year, I get it, but that's kind of where their trajectory is right now. And it's not a knock necessarily on their players because I like a lot of their players. It's more about how those players fit. It's more about their shot profile. They don't take threes. They can't make threes. It's hard to win.
Yep.
It's hard to win. Porzingis had a good year. He's got a player option. He could be up for an extension. I just think they, outside of getting John Wall with number 1, they've always sort of lived in that space. And I think the last time they got out of the first round, if I'm not mistaken, was 2016.
Yeah. Boston.
So you're on a 7-year run with either play-in, first round, or non-playoffs. And with the current roster, you blow it up. Brooklyn is interesting. I think you go for a star. I think you wait, see what happens in the playoffs, see who becomes available, and you go for a star because they have tradable pieces. They have a contract, and it may be hard to move. Obviously, we know who we're talking about. They have a contract that can go get a star, and they have draft assets. So that's the path forward, I think, for Brooklyn.
What do you think for Antonio R. writes in, what do you think it will take for Philly to put it all together? I think besides Joel's health, obviously.
Yeah, I mean that's the obvious one. To me, it's especially in this second round. And I hate to simplify it to this. To me, it probably comes down to Boston's turnovers, and on the other end, can Philly sort of at least keep pace on 3-pointers? And we can look. We'll do something next week, I'm sure, where we really get into this series because it's going to be awesome. But that's sort of the markers that I'm looking for. And I think Boston, when they struggle, it's bad decision making, especially down the stretch of games. So can they limit turnovers, create good shots like they normally do in the half court, and can Philly keep pace from 3-point land?
Yeah. The Jarrell Life writes, can you dig into what days in between playoff games are like while staying in an away city?
Yeah, it's different than the regular season. Regular season, if you're on a road trip and you have a day off in a city, you still go to the gym and you still get your treatment, you still lift weights like you would in the playoffs, but you explore a little bit. Maybe you organize a team dinner. Maybe if you have a friend in that city, you go to dinner. The playoffs are always just more insular. I mean, there were times I didn't leave the hotel room. There were times maybe I went out to dinner with 2 or 3 guys the night before a game, but it's way more meetings. It's way more film. You might get in the regular season on certain teams, you get there for shoot around, or you get there. A lot of teams now do shoot around at the arena at 4 or 4:30 prior to the game, but you may get a 5-minute segment on personnel and then a 10 to 15-minute video max.
Yeah.
And that gets multiplied 2x, 3x on both those things during the playoffs. So you have personnel, like I was on teams where you had personnel meetings every day during the playoffs.
We were talking about this with Trey, I don't think on the show, but after the show the other day, with the timing being off with some of these games because of the playoffs, is there an adjustment that it takes from a body standpoint, just getting yourself, especially, you've had such a sort of defined routine, guys who have routines like that, is there a thing where you have to adjust there at all?
Earlier, yes. Later, it was never an adjustment. It just meant more nap time for me. It just meant more nap
Extra
time.
45 minutes.
Yeah, it just meant I had a clearer head when it was time to put the head on the pillow. I was like, oh, I have a long window here. I don't need to rush this. It was beautiful. So sometimes you might get a central team that gets a 6:30 game or a 6 o'clock game. Weekends, obviously, that's different. Christmas Day was always the same way, where you could potentially get like a 5:30 game, or those were the worst to me.
Yeah.
Especially if you did shoot around in the morning, because it kind of throws your whole routine off. But as long as it's like 6:30 or later, it feels pretty much the same. Thank you for your questions. We appreciate you as always.